Now, good morning, everyone. Welcome to Science with Mr. Wong. Today, we're going to learn a very important thing that involves the world we live in. Within our world, we have liquids and solids. Now, before I start and give you what is a solid and liquid, I'm not sure you guys are very capable of knowing what a liquid and solid is, especially because this is for a first grade class and I know you guys know a lot about the world you live in. Does anybody want to tell me what is a solid? Was that pizza? Believe it or not, pizza is a solid. What else? What else? What is a solid? What else would you say is a solid? Let's analyze that pizza that we just talked about. Pizza, alright. So pizza has, the dough, the bread part, and it has the cheese, and then it has pepperoni depending on your toppings, pineapple depending if you like that or not. Very controversial. I don't really care. I like it. And if it's not there, well, too bad. Let's talk about that crust. When it's the dough, when it's cooked, it's hard. It's pretty much a solid because it's hard and firm. But what about that cheese? Would you say that's a solid, or would you say that that's a liquid? Hmm? That's actually considered a liquid in my perspective, or my way of looking at it. It is something you could touch and firm, but it's also a liquid-like. Actually, that leads me into the definitions of a solid. A solid is something firm and stable, pretty much like this board right here that's firm and stable. It's hard. The floor we stand on, this table right here. Now, when we go to liquid, a liquid is a substance that flows freely but is consistent in volume. So that's like it flows freely like water. Example is an example, but also that cheese. It flows freely because when you pull the pizza up, the cheese is falling, and it's more like a liquid substance than a whole solid. And it gets pretty tricky when you start thinking about stuff like that. So we're gonna look at both sides, and also as well as sometimes some things could be a solid and then turn into liquid, and then some things could be into a liquid turn into a solid. So today's lesson is gonna be about liquids, solids, and things that can actually become both. Because, well, and within this lesson, we're going to investigate. We're gonna have an investigation that allows us to describe and classify different kinds of materials by our observable eyes. And even within that, we would have to look at them in a way that temperature is a factor with these things. Maybe today within the lessons we won't get to touch that, but I want to make a quick little example of how can we determine something to be a solid and a liquid and a liquid into solid. Everyone knows ice, right? Ice, in your ice cream and your soda pop, all of that. Everyone knows ice. But what happens if you leave the ice out in the sun during summer? Hmm? It what? Yes, it melts. And what does it turn into? Does the solid melt and turn into a solid again? No, it turns actually into a liquid, right? That's because of temperature, as the ice requires to be cold to be a solid. But unfortunately, it's hot outside. It becomes changed by that temperature and turned into a liquid. Now, the other way is, let's say one day you get a bottle of water and you put it in the freezer. Does anybody know what would happen to your bottled water, especially the water? Correct, it turns into ice. Thus, the liquid turned back into a solid, which is the ice. And we're gonna have a variety of examples of that, of liquids and solids. We may not have an example of how to turn, a solid into a liquid and look into an ice based on our materials that we have. But we have a lot of things. I'm gonna actually show you those things that we're gonna have that are gonna help you in your investigation. That are gonna be part of your investigation sections. Those little stations I provided all around the class. So I'm just gonna show you an example of one of the possible things that I could have. Pause there. Okay, welcome to one of the things that you will see in your investigation stations. For example, we have here little cubes that you could work on, that you could put them together and everything. That's going to be fun and everything. You're welcome to try that out, but I want you to look at them specifically and notice that how do they feel? How can you classify them? We haven't gone over classification, but spoiler, it's going to be either a solid or a liquid. You have this little cubes. Those are fun to play with. I have this little sponge that you could play with. I want you to just feel how you go from a that thing to this thing, and you can tell it's different. And then we have like what we have hand sanitizer, especially during this time, is very important. You'll be like, it's very liquidy, but yet not as much as a water. For example, this water spray, you can feel it. Both are specifically more than one than the other, as in when you come to compare to solid or a liquid. But I want you to look at that, as well as we have Play-Doh. Play-Doh is very interesting. Be like, solid or liquid, or both. That is very interesting. And then, of course, I want us to also touch a little more, something that we can manipulate even more. Quick little bits of sand, kinetic sand right here. For example, as this, you'd be like, doesn't feel much as a one thing. I don't want to spoil things, and then, but when you start messing with it and start touching and playing, and then you start, putting them in this little things that form them into certain shapes and figures, you'll be like, it's more of another. It gets a little tricky. You're like, liquid or solid or in between. And those are the things that we're gonna touch today about this lesson. And I know you're gonna have some fun with it. Now that you saw what the lesson will be about, as well as the things we're gonna try out, I know you guys are gonna have a fun time with those solids right here, those liquids right here, and those possibly maybe liquid and solid depending on temperature and all that. And well, really this is the time for you guys to investigate and explore those items I've laid out for you guys. And I hope you learn a lot from this lesson. Don't worry, we're gonna review a lot about liquids and solids still, but right now I want you to really just enjoy messing with them, observing them, making your own opinions within your own groups and your own stations of what's a solid, what's a liquid. I want to see how you guys think and how it all works out in your head. Like, some of you might think this is solid, then change your mind that it's a liquid. Some of you guys might be confused. You saw the kinetic sand as well as the Play-Doh. I'm very interested in hearing your thoughts on all of this. And other than that, have some fun.